Morning, Abotai. Yesterday we spoke about that a person should preferably separate 10% of his earnings and donate it to tzedakah. That's what's colloquially known as Maaser Ksafim. The poskim discuss whether or not a person can use Maaser funds to support one's own children. And it really begins from a Gemara. There's a Gemara in Masechet Ketubot, Daf Nun Amud Aleph. The Gemara quotes the pasuk in Tehillim, Ashrei Shomerei Mishpat, Oseh Tzedakah B'chol Eit. Praiseworthy is one who does tzedakah at all times. Says the Gemara, is it possible to do tzedakah at all times? How can you do that? Says the Gemara, Ze'azan banav uvnotav keshem ktanim. This refers to a person who supports his children when they are young. What is that referring to? The poskim discuss. Marana Kesef Mishnah writes, this refers to above the age of 6. According to Torah law, the basic Torah law, a person is obligated to support his children until the age of 6, not more. More than 6 is no longer an obligation. That's usually what people do, but it's not obligated by the Torah. And therefore, the Rambam, in Perek He Meilchot Matanot Aniyim, the Rambam writes that if a person has money and he donates it towards his children to teach them Torah and to raise them along a good path, that is considered tzedakah based on this Gemara. Now, as we've said, so another thing that's important to realize is that tzedakah goes by, you have to give a karov kodem. The more closely related a person is, the bigger mitzvah it is to give him tzedakah. And therefore, the poskim say, obviously, best case scenario is that you give your maaser funds to other tzedakot and take care of your children from regular money. But if money is tight and if a person really feels the need to do so, according to the letter of the law, Maharam Mirotenburg writes in a tshuva that based on this, if a person wants to use his money to teach his children Torah from the age of 6 and above, the halacha is you are allowed to use maaser funds for that purpose. Although Maran Achida disagrees with Maharam Mirotenburg, he says, no, you can only use maaser funds for mitzvot that you otherwise would not have done if you wouldn't spend this maaser money. Supporting your children, everybody does anyway, so you can't do it. Nevertheless, Maran Zechron Bracha in Yechaveh Da'at disagrees with Maran Achida, and he says Maharam Mirotenburg is correct. You are allowed to, and therefore, la'alachan ma'aseh. People ask, am I allowed to use ma'asir money to pay off my tuition bill? The halacha is as follows, listen carefully. If the child is under the age of 6, if it's just for a daycare or whatever, no, you can't, because you're obligated to support him. From the age of 6 and above, both boys and girls in the United States, where we don't only have limudei kodesh, we don't only have Judaic studies, we also have secular studies. So over there, you can't use all of the tuition, all of the maaser funds to pay for the entire tuition, but let's assume the day is split 50-50, you can spend maaser funds to pay half of your tuition bill towards yeshivas. That's la'alachan ma'aseh in the United States. Now, here's another interesting thing. This only applies to, by the way, like I said before, it applies to boys and girls. Boys in yeshiva, girls in Beis Yaakov's, girls' schools. It applies the same. Because you also, although girls are not obligated necessarily to learn Torah, but they're obligated to know what pertains to them, like the Rambam says, to raise them in the proper path, that all is part of it. However, this applies only to yeshivot kedoshot, only to yeshivot that operate according to halacha. It goes without saying, there's no question in the world that if a person sends his children to co-educational, to mixed schools, boys and girls together, that's against halacha. Obviously, you would not be able to use maaser funds to pay for tuition in such a school. Because over there, the Rambam says, why is it considered tzedakah? Because you're leading them along the proper path. If you're subjecting your children to averot, that's not the proper path. And therefore, obviously, you cannot use maaser funds for that kind of tuition. Only separate boys and girls schools, yeshivot and Beis Yaakov's, Al Taharat HaKodesh, that's the discussion in Halacha Ma'aseh. Above the age of 6, you can use Maaser funds for half of the tuition. Have a wonderful day.